I hate really talking to people in person anyway, and that just increases all of the interactions that I need to have. Hi friends, welcome back to the Avocado Toast Budget. If you're new here, my name is Lexa, and today is a very special segment of our What is the Best Budgeting Method for You series. So in this series, typically I break down different budgeting methods, the pros, the cons, kind of a quick overview of how they work. That way you can get an idea, if you've never budgeted before, of what your options are that are already out there and what might work best for you. But I wanted to take that concept one step further for this particular method. Instead of just breaking down, going over the basics and the pros and cons of this method, I wanted to immerse myself in it. So I went ahead and went through every single step that it takes to go through the cash envelope system, and I did it for 2 weeks, and now I have the tea on it and I want to share it with you. The cash envelope system is very popular here on YouTube, and also I see sometimes on like TikTok, things like that. Those like cash envelope stuffing videos, which I totally get. I think they're very satisfying. There's nothing quite like watching people shove a bunch of cash into things. So if you've ever been really curious about the cash envelope system, you didn't really know what it was about, what it would take, if it would work very well for you, we are going over everything you need to know in this video. And let's go ahead and get into it. So when you're looking at it at the surface, the cash envelope system is pretty self-explanatory. You take your paycheck, you turn all of it, if not most of it, into cash, and then you put that cash inside of different saving and spending envelopes that are dedicated to different categories. The cash envelope system is based off of a zero-based budgeting system, which just means that you're giving every single dollar a job. I really love zero-based budgeting systems. I did a video on them here. I will link that if you want to learn more about what that is. But for today's video, all you really need to know is that it just means you're assigning every dollar that you get some sort of a job, you know where it's going. The premise of this method is that since you are physically dealing with cash, you have more of like a mental and emotional attachment to your money, since instead of just like swiping a card and like not seeing that balance go down right away, you are physically having to take money out of an envelope, see how much is left in there, hand over that money, and in theory it's supposed to make you feel more attached to that money and then hopefully spend less. And you might be thinking,
okay, Lexa, but what do you expect me to do? Go take out a lot of cash and then go prance on over to my internet and phone and utility companies and somehow convince them to let me give them money in cash rather than making a payment online?
well, no. So the cash envelope system does recognize that this is 2021 and there are going to be bills that it's just not possible for you to pay in cash. Things like our internet bill and my car insurance and our utilities, we can't pay in cash. We can't even pay rent in cash, but that doesn't mean that you're completely out of luck when it comes to the cash envelope system. Those payments are still factored into your budget, even though you're not paying cash with them, but we'll talk more about that later. And for some context, I actually want to touch on my history with the cash envelope system, because to be perfectly honest with you, this is not my first go around with this system. Back when I was just a little baby budgeter at the start of the parallelogram, I decided I was going to dive headfirst into budgeting by doing the cash envelope system in the middle of a Panda Express. I bought a cash envelope wallet off of Amazon. I started following the Budget Mom's budget by paycheck method and decided that I was now an all cash spender. Shockingly, that came to a screeching halt, specifically when two things happened kind of both at the same time. One, I found YNAB, which basically is like the cash envelope system but all digital. And two, which really would have put a damper in this even if I hadn't found YNAB, is that the panoramic hit and there was like that coin and cash shortage and no one was paying with cash and everyone was afraid to even touch cash. So I really had like no experience with that other than just like setting it up. But I thought now that I am a more seasoned budgeter, I would try it again and give it a fair shot. To be perfectly honest with you, I was not too excited or hopeful going into this, mainly because I hate everything that has to do with cash. I hate touching cash, paying with cash, awkwardly having to get it out of my wallet, nonetheless a cash envelope, while I'm sitting having anxiety at the register because the person behind me is waiting for me to pay and go, and I'm struggling with change in cash, trying to figure out how much I need to hand this person, and it's all just too much. I hate the bank. I hate really talking to people in person anyway, and that just increases all of the interactions that I need to have. But because of the professional that I am, I told myself I would push all of my biases aside and go into this with an open mind. And I really tried, I promise. So let's go ahead and get into a rundown of how this is going to work. I recognize that most likely if you are looking to something like the cash envelope system, you are probably new to budgeting or living paycheck to paycheck and trying to find a way to really get a grasp and a hold on your finances and help you break that paycheck to paycheck cycle. And because of that, I want to simulate living paycheck to paycheck. There's two main reasons behind this. One, that I think it will give me the most genuine experience and an experience that would match up to yours most likely. And also, I have been budgeting for a while and have been lucky enough to save up money, and I don't really feel like converting all of that money to cash and keeping that on hand. Having just a few $100s in cash on hand gives me anxiety. I cannot imagine having $10,000 in cash on hand. So in order to simulate living paycheck to paycheck, I am only budgeting with this system the money that I am paying myself, which leads me to another point. So I am actually self-employed now. If you saw this video right here, woohoo! I got to quit my day job. I do the ATB full time. I am not a corporation, so I'm not on like my own payroll. I just kind of pay myself from the ATB whenever I feel like it. And usually that's like once a month, just because it's like so much easier to only deal with it once a month. But I wanted to be able to simulate multiple paychecks with this method. That way you're not just seeing me like set it up and then not do anything after that. So to really get a feel for this whole process, I simulated as if I was getting paid on a weekly basis every Friday. So we will be budgeting 2 different paychecks for this. And with that background out of the way, let's go ahead and get into the steps of the cash envelope system. Step number 1, get paid. For me, this was on the 7th and the 14th of the month, and I paid myself $400 every paycheck. Now, a little caveat to step 1, you do not have to start this on a payday. Because it's based on a zero-based budget, you can start this at any time. So if you already have money inside of your account, if you wanted to start the cash envelope system, you would just use that money that is in your account right now. And then you would add to it and redo this process every time that you got paid. But again, I am pretending like I had $0 to my name until I got paid. So step number 2 is the big step of this process, which is making your plan. I like to start off with making my categories. So writing down all of the categories I have for my spending. This is going to vary person to person, depending on how specific that you want to be, what your spending habits are like, and really just your life in general. You also want to write down any savings goals that you have, including if you have a specific amount that you want to save for those goals. And while you're doing this, keep in mind that you want to leave money inside of your account to cover any of those automatic transactions that you can't pay in cash. So let me go ahead and give you my example to show you what that might look like. This is what my paycheck number 1 plan looked like. So as I said, I paid myself $400, but I automatically had to save $217 of that in my account because I knew within a couple of days on the 10th, my progressive car insurance payment was going to come out. So that was kind of hurdle number 1 because 50% of my paycheck was going toward that expense. So I really only had half of what I had planned on having to work with here. The rest of my spending categories included gas, groceries, eating out, and fun money. For my savings goals, I had a new phone, medical, new car, car repairs, and a treat yourself fund. This is what my final plan for paycheck 1 looked like, but I really had to tinker around with this because of that huge progressive payment that I had. And on top of that, I've been budgeting for a while. I can tell you what typically I spend on different categories, but I knew that my spending would be a lot different using the cash envelope system because I wasn't going to be able to buy DoorDash and I wasn't going to be able to like prepay for things like carry out or groceries or anything like that. So I had a feeling that there were going to be certain categories like eating out that I would spend less on, and then maybe more categories like groceries that I would spend more on. By paycheck number 2, I had a better feel for like kind of what my spending would look like, and as I expected, I really didn't spend that much money just because I didn't really have the opportunities to spend money at places that accepted cash. So here are the totals for all of my categories at the end of paycheck 1, and now we are repeating this step 2 and making a plan for our paycheck number 2, which in my case is another $400, and this time I got a little bit more lucky because I didn't have any more automatic payments, so I was able to put all $400 toward these goals. Even though I didn't get gas last week, I went ahead and added another $20 because gas is really expensive right now, and I knew since I was paying with cash, I wasn't going to be able to save money on gas like I typically can with Get Upside. And when it comes to eating out, I actually ended up spending more money than I thought I would on this. I figured since I wasn't getting DoorDash, I probably wouldn't spend much money, but Liz and I actually ended up going out to eat breakfast, so I spent more than I thought I would, so I wanted to make sure I had enough covered for this next week, so I went ahead and put $40 in there instead. I barely touched my fun money category, so I'm just gonna leave the $30 that I have in there. I'm not gonna add any more because I wanna add more to my savings goals. So this is what my new system looks like, and I can move forward with this plan. Now, going back to the first time I did this with paycheck 1, step number 3 is to get cash. And the reason that you need to make your plan before getting cash is for many reasons, because you need to make sure you have enough money in your account in case there are any automatic expenses that are coming up that you can't pay in cash, but also because you need to know the exact bills that you need to put into these envelopes. Now, little did I know going into this how much of a fucking headache going to the bank was. I honestly haven't been to the bank in person in years. Liz and I have online high yield savings accounts. We are unbelievably happy with those. And really the reason I was able to do this is because we do technically still have a local bank here that's right across the street that I have some money in, just because that's where Liz was originally getting paid back before we switched our joint account over. So I had to keep mine open to move things around. It's complicated, it's unnecessary. But I had some money in there, so that was the money I was using. Since the local bank, it's easier to get exact bills from rather than going to an ATM and then trying to go from there. But wow, was this a humbling experience. Me and my social anxiety, of course, were overthinking everything. I wasn't sure if I was supposed to push the button. I didn't know if I was supposed to talk to the lady, if she was supposed to talk to me first. I've never filled out a withdrawal slip, so I had to figure that out. I just went through the little drive thing and with the little thing that goes shoo, shoo. And anyway, if you're more of an adult than I am, then you probably think that this is absolutely stupid. But I really was not a fan of the bank. And the lady wasn't very nice, but whatever, I ended up figuring it out. After calculating my plan for paycheck 1, I wrote down all of the specific bills that I was going to need. I just put them on a sticky note and I sent that up with my driver's license and my debit card to her, because if I were to get just 4 $100 bills, I'm not going to be able to split up the money that I need into the exact amount into each category, which is literally the whole point of the cash envelope system. So that's why you need to plan ahead to make sure you know what bills you're requesting for the amount of money that you need. And keep in mind, this is probably going to be different every time, so you are going to have to change this up every time. Step 4 is to acquire envelopes. Now, lucky for me, I have that cash envelope wallet that I had mentioned a little bit earlier that already comes with cash envelopes inside of it, and it's like a little binder system. It's so cute. But unlucky for me, 2 weeks ago, I decided to cut all of those cash envelopes up because I thought I'll never pay in cash again, and I was going to use them for coupons to organize my coupons, which that worked, but it kind of destroyed the envelopes for this purpose. So I had to make my own, which ended up being good because now I get to show you guys the process. Now, as a little bit of a PSA, I am inherently a pretty creative person when I want to be and when I'm not under stress. But on a specific day, I hadn't thought about the fact that I had cut up my envelopes. I didn't plan time to make cash envelopes, and I had some other things that I had to get done that day before 5 p.m. because it was a Friday and everything was going to close. So for me, this was not the most fun experience. However, back when I had first tried the cash envelope system before my cash wallet came in, because everything back then, the mail was so delayed, I had actually just went ahead and made my own using the same method, but I had gone a step further. I printed off pretty things on the piece of paper, that way they were all pretty and color coded, and I laminated them and had pretty fonts and all of that. And if you are creative and have the time and the will, you could definitely do that. I did not do that here. I just followed along with this tutorial, and in this little fast forward through, I am talking you through it thinking that I don't know, somehow you would learn something from me, but honestly, if you want to do this, just watch the tutorial that I'll link down in the description box below. It's the exact one that I followed. She does a great job. But on top of that, I went through and just kind of lined up the holes that are in my cash envelope system, and I hole punched individually my cash envelopes, that way they could fit into my wallet. But that's only something you have to do if you have a wallet that has a flippy binder like that. Also, from my experience, I highly recommend, if you are getting envelopes or making them, to make them the horizontal ones where you put cash in this way rather than the vertical ones where you put cash in this way, because it is just so much easier to put the cash in and out. Overall, the process of making these was pretty simple. It just was kind of time consuming because you had to cut everything out and laminate it, and honestly some of my cuts came out super jagged. But again, if you're craftier than me in that sense and you have the time, you could make this super cute and use scrapbook paper and all of that. If you're really dedicated to this method, there are tons of different ways to make cute envelopes. But I just went ahead and went with the bare minimum since I wanted to make sure that I got these done before I was going out. Step 5, we are on to the cash envelope stuffing. This is the fun part, the stuffing of the cash. I know people love watching videos on this. I did my best to try to show you what I was doing. But again, that is not the kind of content creator that I am. I don't often like have my camera facing that way to try to show what I'm doing with my hands on a table. So I had a really weird setup, but I was doing the best that I could. Like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, when it comes to stuffing your cash envelopes, there are two different main categories you're working with, and that is spending versus saving. So those spending envelopes are meant to be your spending money. You're meant to take money out of them as you go and you pay for things. The saving envelopes, on the other hand, are meant to add up over time. So most likely you're putting money in a lot more often than you're taking money out. Now, step 6, be an all cash spender. So everything other than those automatic transfers is now going to be paid in cash. So I have to go from someone who literally never carries cash on them ever and only puts things on credit cards to spending everything that I have in cash other than those things that I just can't pay in cash. The big part about this is that you have to track your spending. The whole point of a zero-based budget, whether it's the cash envelope system or literally any other system out there that revolves around it, is that you track every single penny that you spend. That way you know where your money is going and you're able to evaluate how much money you're spending on average on certain categories and things. There are tons of different ways that you can do this. The cash envelope wallet that I have, that I will link down below, does, like I said, come with those cash envelopes, and it does come with like little inserts as well. However, do keep in mind, the cash envelopes are the vertical ones, which are not my favorite, and the little inserts that they come with don't really make a lot of sense to me because they also like go into the little rings, which means you can't just like pull them out. And if you're tracking your spending, most likely you'd want to like track it on the go. So for me, I just needed something that was a little bit easier. I just decided to use my notes app. For me, I always have my phone on hand. It was just a lot easier to just jot that down. So now that we've gone through all of the steps and I have completed the 2 weeks of our cash envelope extravaganza, let's go ahead and weigh the pros and cons. Some of the pros of this system. So for me personally, there were a few times that I wanted to order takeout, specifically DoorDash, and then I remembered that I was doing the all cash spending and I wouldn't be able to do that. I'd have to go in person in order to pay them cash for the thing that I wanted, and that got me to just end up cooking at home. So in that respect, I was able to save some money. And also I will admit that having cash on hand for me does feel more tangible since it is like a physical representation of the money that I have, rather than just like swiping on my credit card and checking the app every couple of days. So I definitely was more mindful of the money that I had, especially in each category as I took money out, and I was able to visually see how much I would be left with. Also, this really gave me a chance to think about what my priorities are when it comes to my money. Since that first week, I really only had less than $200 to work with for a whole week. I had to decide what I wanted that money to do for me. I knew I needed gas, I knew I needed groceries, but I also wanted to be able to put some money towards savings. So it really helped me narrow down my savings goals and decide what was most important to me. And with that, I really had to reassess my goals. Since I had to be purposeful with every single dollar that I had to be able to justify it to myself why one category was getting more than the other. And honestly, this was just like a really good conversation for me to have with myself and be able to check in with whether my money was doing for me what I wanted it to. Now, some of the cons of the system. The biggest one, hands down for me, is just the waste of time. Going inside to have to prepay for gas, having to go into the grocery store in person, shop, and pay in cash, rather than just ordering curbside pickup, which for me at our Walmart and our Kroger, it's literally the exact same. I don't pay anything extra to go pick it up curbside, and I save myself hours. Making those cash envelopes, whew, and going to the bank every week. It seems like such a small thing, but for me, it's just not part of my routine. So it seemed like a lot of my valuable time was being wasted. Because every single time that you get paid, you do need to make a plan, figure out exactly what bills you need, go to the bank, get those bills, come back, and put them in the right envelopes. Another big con for me is that I wasn't able to take advantage of the cashback systems and apps that I love. I mentioned it earlier, but I save tons of money using Get Upside when it comes to gas, and I can't do that because you have to pay with a card in the app, and if you're not paying with a card, you can't use the app. Same thing goes for Flues and Dosh. I love both of those systems, but again, you have to pay with a card. So I wasn't able to claim cash back for things that I typically would have. Not to mention the fact that since I wasn't putting things on credit card, I wasn't getting that standard cash back either. Also, it made me really nervous to have cash. Like I said earlier, I was already nervous just with like a couple $100s, and you could definitely minimize this by keeping all of it in a safe and only taking out like the envelopes that you know that you're going to need. But for me, since I wasn't used to how I was spending, I didn't know what envelopes I was gonna need at any time. I could keep my savings envelopes at home, but for me, I felt more comfortable having all of my spending envelopes. But if something were to happen, if I dropped it and left that cash somewhere, there's no insurance for that like there is if I lose my card. And not to mention, I am someone who has anxiety and thinks about the worst case scenario for everything, so there's no way I was able to just go out with only cash. I had to bring a card with me just in case, because God forbid something happens that I need more than the cash that I have on hand. So I had a card for paying just in case anyway. Thankfully, I didn't have to use it. The only times that I did use my card during this experience were either the automatic payment to my Progressive insurance or things that were actually the ATB's expenses that I was reimbursing myself for. So what are some of my final thoughts? First off, would I do this again? Hell no. Do I think that the negatives that I experienced would apply to everyone or would be considered negatives for everyone? Also, definitely not. That is why personal finance is so personal, and the whole reason I came up with this series anyway is because I know that depending on your situation, the kind of person you are, what your spending habits look like, one budgeting system might work great for someone and it might suck for you. And the same thing could go for me and you. But for me, had I had the mindset going into this, if I was like a new budgeter, that this had to be the method that worked, and if I couldn't make this work, then I must suck at budgeting, I would have gotten so frustrated with this very quickly and probably turned away from budgeting and never looked back. So that's why it really does not matter what budgeting system you use, as long as it's something that works for you. And for me, I have a zero-based budgeting system that I love and does work for me. That is the one thing that I really did like about the cash envelope system, is it is based on that zero-based budget. So I really felt like I was giving every dollar a job. It had a purpose. And obviously I knew exactly what that money was going toward, which is really good, especially if you kind of feel out of control when it comes to your finances. However, I get all of the benefits by using YNAB and doing that zero-based budget, but I don't have any of those cons that are there for me when it comes to paying with cash. Now, if you are someone who likes spending with cash and you know that cash has like a big impact on your relationship and the way that you think about money, then this could be a really good system for you. I know personally, my partner loves paying in cash. I was able, after I was done with this, the cash that I had left, I just gave to her and then she Venmo'd me. And that's because she really does enjoy having cash on hand. She prefers paying with cash. She says it makes it feel more real and she's able to keep up with her budget a little bit better. So if that is the kind of person you are, this could be a really good budgeting system for you. But either way, I really hope that you enjoyed this and you learned something cool. If you did, please remember to give this video a big thumbs up. It really helps out the YouTube algorithm, helps boost this video to the top. That way more people can find this content. And I will see you all next time. Bye.